Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we're going to talk about mountain warfare. Now, India has one of the world's largest and most experienced mountain warfare armies, and we'll try and understand in the next half an hour the importance and significance of mountain warfare and how does India fare in this entire scenario. For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce the guests to you, beginning with retired Major General Ravi Arora, Chief Editor of Indian Military Review. We also have with us another retired Major General, Dhruv Katoch. He is Director of India Foundation. And we also have with us Mr. Mayank Singh, Senior Journalist, to try and give us a better perspective from his point of view. Let me begin the show, and let me begin with you, General Katoch, since you've been part of the Mountain Division as well. You've served there. So for introducing the entire situation to our viewers, if let's start with, trying and understanding what exactly do we mean when we talk about mountain warfare, and why is it so important?
Right, Vishal. I think before I get on to the mountains per se, let me just go on a slight historical analogy. Where have the invasions to India come from? When we go back for 1,000 years, where did the invaders come from? They crossed the Khyber, right? And later on, when we look a few hundred years behind now, then they came by the oceans. Now, traditionally, when we are looking at the eastern side, the Himalayas were thought to be impregnable. So we found all the invasions really coming from the west, but they again had to cross the Khyber Pass. Now, till such time as we did not have a border with China and we had a border with Tibet, the eastern borders were. So to that extent, there was never any real concern of any threat developing from the Himalayas. But ever since Tibet was overtaken, consumed, so to say, by China, then we had a live border with China, which is where the present problem in eastern Ladakh lies, and also in some places in the central sector and in the east along the McMahon line. Now, all these areas have to be guarded because the importance of the Himalayas per se is that the Chinese, in my view, are trying to get control over the entire Himalayan range. So it is vital that you protect the watershed. That is the point over which the line has been divided, both in the northeast, that is by the McDonald line, and I beg your pardon, in eastern Ladakh by the McDonald line. And when you are looking at in the east, in Arunachal by the McMahon line.
Okay.
So what really does it involve? It involves actually looking into the passes through which enemy forces can enter. And to control those passes is the entire game of mountain warfare. So it is not really to sit on every peak. There are a large number of peaks. You can have a gap of 200 kilometers totally undefended because there are no passes coming through, especially when you're talking about the Arunachal sector. But you cannot say the same what is happening in eastern Ladakh because there are many places by which the troops can get through. So you have to protect really the passes. The enemy comes through the passes. His logistic supplies come through the passes. So to protect the passes, you've got to protect the heights which lie on those passes. Okay. That is the fundamental principle. So once you protect those heights, then you've got to ensure that your own logistics reach up to those areas. You've got to ensure that the soldiers who have to stay on those in those high altitude areas, sometimes they range at 15, 16, 18,000 feet, is like they're staying in Saichen now, right? So they have to be acclimatized. Your equipment which has to go there has to function in those sub-zero temperatures. So really it is a question of the human being has to be fit and able to survive in those areas. The machine has to be capable of operating on those areas. We have to ensure the maintenance of the entire force in those hostile areas. The road support, communication support, the air support, all of that has to be made available because ultimately to protect those heights, you've got to protect the logistics, you've got to protect the routes which are coming into your area. And once those are protected, then we can say that we have protected our particular area of the mountain.
Okay.
Vishal.
Okay. Let me bring in General Arora here before we go on to talk about India's specific strength as well as the way we develop our mountain warfare army. General Arora, your views on this aspect, and it's quite a historical perspective which General Katoch has put in there, trying to make us understand why a mountain warfare is that important.
Yeah, Dhruv has set the stage for us to understand because I think 80% of your viewership may not have been to the mountains. They may have seen them on their TV screens. Where they have been are hills, you know. We classify up to 6,000 feet, and I'll talk about feet because people are more comfortable. 6,000 feet are where all your hill stations are located up to. Beyond that, the mountains start 7,000, 8,000, 9,000. And then from 9,000 onwards, the high altitude starts, and then we go on to super high altitude in Siachen. So, mountains are something where people have seen, but they have not realized where the Indian troops are fighting. Like beyond 11,000 feet, there is no tree line or timber line. It's barren. It's only stones and mud. There may be water sources. Water sources are way down in the valleys. Water has to be fetched up to the heights. These mountains, there are mountains, I would say, and then there are mountains. And mountains of Ladakh are different from the mountains of Arunachal Pradesh. In Ladakh, mountains have kind of deserts between them in the valleys. They are far bigger expanses. So features of mountains are quite different. And what you asked, the Indian Army has been fighting in the mountains since 1948. We started the Indo-Pak War with 1948 in the mountains in J&K. The line of control area is mountains. There are fewer areas towards the north of Pir Panjal where you enter into high altitude. South of Pir Panjal, there are some mountains, and then you come down to the hills. And in 65, we fought many battles in the mountains. Kargil was a classic example of what mountain warfare is all about. Since then, of course, since 62, we have been occupying Ladakh, we have been occupying the mountains in Arunachal Pradesh. We have lots of experience. We have specialized mountain divisions. 10 mountain divisions were raised after 62. Another division is a high altitude division. In the mountain core, we are raising another couple of divisions. We have we have built up specialty in mountain warfare, so much that foreign countries also vie to exercise with us. They want our experience of mountain warfare. Although they have their own manuals on mountain warfare, but they know our experience is very valuable. We have the high altitude warfare school. We have mountain battle schools in every formation. We have the Siachen battle school. So as compared to other armies, we are very, very well off in mountain warfare.
Okay.
That's because mountain warfare is completely different from warfare in the plains, warfare in the deserts, warfare in the jungles. And I mean, it's a different kettle of fish altogether, and we can come to that.
Okay, definitely. We'll talk about that. But let me bring in Mayank here as well. Mayank, being a defense journalist, you know, you had the pleasure of being to some of these places, some of these heights, which both General Arora and General Katoch are talking about. So, one, if you could share your experience with our viewers, and two, how is your perspective as a civilian, as a journalist about mountain warfare? Because this is a very treacherous terrain we are talking about.
See, when you talk of mountains, there are various aspects which affect an army. So when you say army, it is your men. How does height, which affects man, the machine, and the equipment which fire? I mean, when you are firing an artillery shell, how far does it go? If the atmosphere is rarefied, it doesn't have oxygen, it is affecting the man as well as your equipment. So when the commanders who go there, or the SOPs, they change completely, and they might surprise you. The biggest fight which happens on the mountains is actually to maintain the morale of the men, which is affected on multitude ways. Actually, mentally, your hunger dies, and Indian Army, which is the most rugged army, because it has got its soldiers placed to the heights of 20,000 feet even now. It all started, as General Arora was saying, 1948. But the biggest learning came after 1984, when we started Operation Make Doodh, which is Siachen. And initial years it was not the enemy which was killing you actually. It was the weather, the climate, the conditions, the logistical arrangements, the food, the medical equipment, the medical aspects of the thing. And it continued till 2000. And you were learning every day. You were learning in a difficult manner, in a tougher form, actually. And when you talk of mountains, what is in east is 11,000 feet. When you talk of Arunachal, and it keep rising, goes up to 17,500 feet to Karakoram Pass. And then you again go to Kargil, you go to Siachen, you go to LOC, as General Ravi was saying. These have a multifarious effects. That's the SOPs change. Your equipment change. Profile of the mountains, which people should understand, is very different. It is not only mountains. They may look barren. It doesn't have any greenery over it. But the temperature can plummet to the level of minus 30. You are not able to take your, even properly breathe. And when you have to lug in your load of 18 kgs, your rifle of 5 kgs, your water, your food, the way the men are sitting today in Chushul, I mean, they are in open, habitats have been gradually built up. It affects you completely. That's how the SOPs which have been built, trained in places like Siachen Battle School, in high altitude warfare school, they have made what the army is today. Okay. Importance, because the biggest length of Himalayas, the highest mountains, they lie with the India. And today, when any side you go, western side you go Pakistan, northern side you go to China, look at China, enemy is there. The best study which was done was by General SPP Thurat, 1959, under exercise Lal Killa. He did a study, and the book has to be read because your program is seen by students, researchers. The book is Reveille to Retreat. Okay. And 22 pages, they have got every detail of the passes. The way he had mentioned how 3-layered security has to be made to stop the Chinese, which may act unpredictable. That is how mountain warfare is. But okay, we have come a long way. Indian Army is one of the most trained, motivated in terms of mountain warfare. And 10 years back, when you have brought out a specialized mountain corps, which is taking shape further. And there are lots of changes which are happening within the fighting organizations, like integrated battle groups and all, keeping the concept of mountains and various terrains. Okay. Let me bring in General Katoch for more details on this particular aspect. General Katoch, as Mayank was pointing out, at these particular heights and in these treacherous terrains, the bigger enemy seems to be the weather, the climate, and that's a big challenge out there. So from your experience, how does our soldiers overcome that part, one, and two, what is being done with the passage of time, utilization of technology as well, from those days when we were just trying to understand the terrain as well as to ensure that we stay there, and days where we are right now?
Vishal, just to add interest to this particular topic, the first expedition which went to the Siachen Glacier, the very first time, that was led by Colonel Bull Kumar and Colonel N. Kumar, a very, very famous mountaineer, the pride of India, so to say. It came as a mountaineering expedition. Today, troops are living there 24/7. I mean, can you imagine somebody living on Mount Everest? That is the analogy I will put in. So we have come a long way. Now the question is, for the first few years on these super high altitudes, we suffered very heavy losses because the body cannot take that element of stress which high altitudes put. So, of course, now we have learned what all needs to be done, how you should get acclimatized there. And more importantly, you restrict the tenure of people there to 3 months. Then they come back. You pull them back because if you stay there for 6 months to 1 year, even if you survive, because now our medical systems, the army doctors are absolutely superb. They won't let anything happen. But you see, there is a stress on the body which becomes permanent. There is an impact of high altitudes, regardless of what you do, it impacts you. So this is one aspect. So now I think medically going in through the acclimatization phases, that is one. The second aspect which he spoke about, I think it's a very important aspect which Mayank just mentioned. It is the loneliness which actually creeps in there. You see, you are at a place by which you have no internet, you have no telephone communications, right? You got absolutely nothing. Nothing operates there. Now, here. How do you maintain morale? How do you maintain motivation? And here, the job of the officer, I think, becomes vital because there is a young officer there, and that chap is going through the same rigors as the men, and maintaining morale in those very difficult conditions is something which I think is vital, and
Okay.
it is a critical role of leadership. Now, one of the things which I would try there when I commanded my battalion in one sector, and I commanded a division in the other. Now, one of the things as a commanding officer, when you would go out and the temperatures were, say, -20, -30, it was snowing, and then you speak to the sentry and you would ask him, is it cold? And he would say, yes, sir, bahut thanda hai. And then you tell him, do you know what that means? And he would, you see, you are the commanding officer, so he really won't reply. And you tell him it means you are alive. Only people who are alive feel the cold. Now, you see, you got to change the psyche. You got to change the psyche from him feeling cold is bad to thinking cold is good because it indicates it is a sign of life. Now, this is just one example, but you do it repeatedly. You see how we do it, how the commanders do it on different areas at different times. It is a process of continuously talking to the men, keeping them occupied, keeping them motivated, keeping them entertained. Right? The army, I will say, the country has done a tremendous job. You see, today your clothing, your food, etc., even the communication lines are improving day by day. But if I have to put in a note, I think we need to do a great deal more as far as the communication aspect is concerned, especially on the roads, because China has got the roads right up to the line of control or the line of actual control, whereas ours are not really up to that level. So that is one area which I think is still weak, but I think things are improving, and a great deal of stress has been put in on this particular aspect over the last 5 to 6 years. And I think that is a positive development. And this is only going to increase further with the current tensions which we are having in eastern Ladakh.
Okay, definitely. A lot is being done as far as the infrastructure part is concerned. And the morale of the men out there is really, really important. But let's, focus our attention to the other aspect as well. That is the machinery and the weapons as well. General Arora, if we look at, this treacherous terrain, as Mayank was pointing out earlier, the SOPs changed completely. So how are we prepared for that?
Yeah, this is the most important part of mountain warfare. As we saw in Kargil, because that was the war which was brought to our bedrooms through the media. Whoever is defending the heights, and that is why recently we saw the Indian Army went and occupied heights on the line of actual control near Chushul, south of Pengongso, because whoever occupies the heights requires lesser number of people to hold them, and whoever wants to capture them requires far larger numbers, maybe 6 to 7 times the numbers who are holding to capture them. That's the nature of mountain warfare. 10 men can hold off 300 men for many days if they have the wherewithal. Second is that you are less vulnerable than the attacker. The attacker has to climb steep slopes. He is in the open. He is vulnerable. He can be aimed and shot. He can be stopped by obstacles. And as they say, if you run out of ammunition, you can start throwing stones at him and you can repel the attack. So whoever is occupying heights has got the advantage. And we saw how bravely our young soldiers and young officers went in attack after attack. It often results in close quarter battle, hand-to-hand fighting to dislodge anybody from the heights. It's not so easy. Conversely, if you are the attacker, you require larger number. The ratio is very large. You cannot attack during day. You have to attack during night. You have to take an indirect route. You cannot go frontally. It's very expensive by way of casualties. You require much more firepower to neutralize or to soften the target which is being occupied by anybody on the heights. You don't occupy lower slopes. You don't occupy the valleys. Those are for logistics bases at the back. Heights are the peaks are the key to holding any area in the mountains. There are direct firing weapons which you aim and fire, and there are indirect firing weapons. Indirect firing weapons are those which have a higher trajectory. The shells go up and come down, and they explode, and they cause casualties in an area and not pinpoint like bullets. So these indirect firing weapons have a lot of problem there. There are ridge lines, and there are crest lines, and there are valleys and ravines, and you don't know where they land. What is the effect? Although technology is changing, and space and satellites and aerial photography and UAVs and electronic warfare are changing the scenario even in mountain warfare. But still, the effect of indirect firing weapons, you require more of their gola barood, and even the direct firing weapons, their trajectories go haywire in the mountains because of the density of the air. You have to again zero your weapons regularly out there. So weapons are affected in a major way. Also, if you have gaps in the mountains, between fingers, between ridges, between the features, these are vulnerable. You have to put them under surveillance. These are going to be exploited by the infiltrators and the attackers. So these are the kind of problems other than logistics. We have been using mules for so many years, but now we have utility helicopters, you have heavy lift helicopters changing the scenario. They can carry guns underslung, lift them. We have got ultralight howitzers, which are specially for mountains. We have light tanks coming into mountains. So scenario is changing, the logistics scenario is changing, but of course we still have to rely on air maintenance, mules, and such like facilities for many areas which we are occupying.
Okay.
Occupying a fresh area, a virgin area in the mountains requires hell of a lot of effort by way of making defenses. At those heights, there is no material available. Everything has to be carried. Even water has to be carried up the mountain in mule pakhals, like animal transport. And I remember in certain new areas where reinforced concrete defenses were made, it took up to 3 to 4 years to complete the defenses. Luckily, for so many years on the Chinese border, we have been occupying the heights. And so we have not paid a heavy price. If wherever you have heights vacant, the Chinese are going to occupy it. This is the lesson we have learned.
Okay, quite a lot of lessons learned. You're right, General Arora. And looks like, it's not only the morale of the men, but the logistics, the infrastructure as well. But technology seems to be making things a bit easier to being there. Let's have final concluding comments from, Mayank. Mayank, quickly, if you could look at this particular aspect of how technology is aiding us now and in refining our mountain warfare skills there as well.
When you say mountain warfare, it's not just the army. Air Force also comes in a big way, actually. And logistics, in terms of logistics, there are strategic airlift capacities which India has built up. The other thing is you have got AVACs, you have got machineries which are surveillance equipments and all, which can see far. And by occupying heights, which we have heard that on the Pangong Tso, which is the area in discussion nowadays, on the southern bank of Pangong Tso, on the northern bank of Pangong Tso, you have picked up heights. Heights, because of the clear atmosphere and weather, you can see 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers far off. And there's a technical term called as making things untenable. So you can make your enemy's movement untenable because you can see and predict and accordingly fortify your things. Technology has changed in terms of clothing also. So you have got, clothing which are specially meant for high altitude. You have got mountaineering equipments. You have got movement, which is armored vehicles and all. And the biggest thing is all the mountains, what we see 3,488 kilometers, we are discussing in particular because, there is a issue going on in Eastern Ladakh, and the entire LAC is very different. It is green, it is barren, at places it is white. And when it's white, your technology comes in, like, your compasses come in there. And these areas, so unpredictable. Once you have, let's say it snows, it whites out, your entire movement stops. Neither helicopter nor anything can come, and a small thing like diarrhea can kill a person there. So you've got specialized doctors who are working on high altitude medicine, high altitude atmosphere, how to look after all these things.
Okay.
So technology has come up. We have improved very well. We have brought down casualties very big way. But you have to also understand Chinese will have to also face lots of trouble because till this time they had not been placing their men right at the LAC. They had got a concept of logistics arrangement behind, staying 20, 30 kilometers back. And then because of their good infrastructure road, they used to bring in men quickly in best of the vehicles. That has changed. They will have to come up, face the weather conditions, and that's where Indian Army has always been training well into it and has done quite well.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Mayank, General Katoch, as well as General Ravi, Arora, for sharing your views with our viewers. So this is all about mountain warfare, and as our panelists were pointing out, it is really extremely difficult in these treacherous terrain. Our troops are doing their best, aided by technology, by the logistic and infrastructure which has been put in place out there, and their morale as well. We'll come back again next week with a different topic. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television. Thank you.